Okay, perfect. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here early. I'd like to call the facility committee meeting to order, noting that the members of the committee are here and the appropriate people in the audience. I need approval of the agenda with one slight change under district-wide maintenance planning after the NAMI bid. We are going to look at a middle school roof bid that we talked about last month, and those bids are back in, so we'll be reviewing that after that. So with that change, I need approval of the agenda.
So moved. Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. I did not receive any public comments. Neither did anybody else. Thank you. So consideration of the Heritage Elementary School bids, starting with concrete reinforcement steel.
Thank you, Joan. So just as a reminder, Vogel is continuing to bring bids forward that they believe are necessary to keep the project on track.
Mhm.
And so you've seen a few of them that have come forward so far. The bulk of the bids are coming in June. So that's going to be the final bid package that's going to have the overwhelming majority of the information. But between now and then, they're releasing smaller components for keeping us on track. And so what we have in the packet today were two particular bids that Vogel was wanting us to consider. After looking at them, they feel that the structural steel, which is the B agenda item, can be moved to May, and that there's enough time to look at that further. So they're requesting to move that to May.
Okay.
The concrete reinforcing steel, they're requesting to move that forward to the April 10th meeting. And Rebecca, if you wouldn't mind bringing that up. So one of the things that we've asked them to do, so as board members, you can see for a frame of reference, to the far right, you see a column called Vogel BBBC, Vogel Brothers Building Company budget. So you see the budget for this line item was $99,450. And then to the left, you would see that they have proposals from Badgerland and then Capital Steel. And between the two of them, the low bid is Badgerland. Badgerland happens to be in the same cul-de-sac we are. We did work with Badgerland on the intermediate school, so they do have experience working on school buildings. So we feel very good about working with them again. And Vogel's recommendation is to move that Badgerland bid forward to the April board meeting.
I have a motion to move forward. I guess what's the rationale between the discrepancy? Are they building two buildings? Or?
It always comes down to, transportation to get to our site, depending on where they're at, how busy they are, whether or not they think it's going to take overtime, if they have the staff available, if they bring more people in. I mean, it's just every business that bids got different factors that they put into it. But yes, Jack, that's a very wide margin. We don't expect to see differences normally that large, but we're pleased to be able to partner with Badgerland again for this project.
So we have a motion on the table. Second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. And we'll move the structural steel till next month. So referendum projects, the furniture selection.
So this agenda item is really just an update. So the facility committee did recommend that the board approve the furniture vendor selection proposal from Epstein Ewan. So that moved forward to the board and that was approved. Since then, we've been working on putting that process in place. I just have some notes in here for an update for you. We did submit a request for quote to 7 different vendors. So I worked with Epstein Ewan to create a pretty wide list of 7 different vendors, including who we worked with in the past at the intermediate school. We received 6 responses, so one of the 7 furniture vendors decided not to participate. We then reviewed all 6 responses. I did it for the district, and then Epstein Ewan did it as well. And we combined our evaluations to come up with 3 vendors to be interviewed tomorrow. Those 3 vendors are Demco, Duet, and Atmosphere. The interview team will be seeking to make a recommendation for the April 10th board meeting. So just so you know who's doing the interviews, it's Danielle Dawson from Heritage, the assistant principal. So Dan has asked Danielle to lead this effort for Heritage. Jeff Keenis is coming from the middle school. I'll be a part of it. And then Tim Shell from Bethel Circle wants to be a part of the process. And then the team from Epstein Ewan. So when we narrowed it down to 3, there was one factor that was pretty important as I looked at these. One of the things that we talked about when this committee recommended the proposal was Epstein Ewan's fee dropped from 10% to 5%. But then they stated that some of these furniture vendors might seek to have design fees on top of the Epstein fees. As I was evaluating the proposals, there were high quality proposals back that did not charge design fees. And then there were some that did. So I scored very low the ones that included design fees on top of the Epstein Ewan design fees. And so those aren't the ones that we're bringing forward. And the ones that we are bringing forward all have a really strong financial component in that they have purchasing agreements in place. So we know at a minimum, we will be able to purchase product based on national or state purchasing agreements. One of my main questions tomorrow is going to be for these firms about the potential to get pricing that is better than state contract pricing, especially for items that we have large quantities of, and what their intent would be to try to work on our behalf to get pricing that might potentially be better than state pricing. I know the building leadership will look at this from the lens of obviously teacher involvement, pilot classrooms, design services. So I think we have a good group tomorrow to look at these, these vendors from maybe different perspective. And then we will intend to have a recommendation for Monday the 10th.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve.
So are there any questions about where we're at with that?
Sounds great. Thanks.
All right, so if not.
Yeah, moving on to the district maintenance planning.
So want to bring back a couple of items. The first one that we were gonna for sure work on was HVAC projects, and then I knew John was working on middle school, but I wasn't sure if it'd be ready. So for district-wide maintenance planning, just as a frame of reference, we had $6.4 million of maintenance work included in the $175 million. As you all know, we have an extensive maintenance list that we have prepared and have worked on for several years. That has been converted over from Vogel into a Vogel list that they took and have been assisting us with updating pricing and looking at which items are the oldest and need to be replaced. But even with that, we have realized it's very important for the district to take a deep dive into that 6.4 million that we have available and to make sure that we are prioritizing the work with the right projects. Because just because something might be on the list, like a boiler that might be 15 years old, doesn't actually mean that there's a problem with it. It actually could be functioning really well right now, and there could be very little service attached to it, and maybe we don't need to replace it. So I'm going to ask Pete from North American Mechanical to come up and join us, because Pete's going to give us an example of taking a deeper dive into the maintenance work. Which Pete did for the HVAC for us, so the HVAC projects. I'm gonna ask Rebecca to bring up Pete's attachment and ask him to talk through how from North American Mechanical's end, they have assisted the district in taking a deeper dive into what really should be done for HVAC and why. And so Pete, if you wouldn't mind jumping up to this table here, if you just want to kind of introduce yourself and what your role is, and then kind of just take us through the work that you've done.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Steve. So yeah, my name is Pete Rothering, North American Mechanical. I'm here, so I'm basically a service rep for the district. So we have lots of resources at North American Mechanical that help with whether it's construction or service related items. I'm just a conduit to a lot of those resources. And so here this morning to sort of walk you through this list, explain what it is, how we generated it, and what it means for the district, basically. And obviously, if questions, just cut me off, and I want to make sure I give you the right information. So, so what you see in front of you here is a list of basically all the HVAC equipment that North American Mechanical is recommending to budget for replacement in the near future, meaning 2 or 3 years probably. We have, you know, a list of equipment that's much longer than this, of all the equipment in the district that we service. Our guys are on site pretty much daily doing maintenance or repairs or troubleshooting. So we went through that list in pretty good detail to generate this list of priorities. And so a number of things went into that. One is just our general industry knowledge of equipment like this. So what's the normal lifespan of it? Meaning, and then what that looks like in terms of replacement at some point. But then we went a little deeper to Steve's point and said, okay, well, there's some boilers, for example, at the high school that are getting close to that lifespan, but they're running pretty well. And the urgency on them is a little bit lower because if one fails, it doesn't impact your ability to heat the building. Whereas on the opposite side of that, the chiller at Arboretum, for example, you have one chiller. It's also past its useful life. It's also seeing some issues and some repairs and things. And so we know it's getting to that point. It's the only chiller you have at Arboretum. And so if that goes down, you don't have air conditioning in the building. So a little bit different level of urgency. And so we took that information. I talked to all my techs about all the equipment in the district and generated this list and said, hey, this is the thing. These are the items that we think you should really prioritize. And then we ranked them. And so the red is the most urgent. Yellow is a red, meaning hopefully very soon that gets approved and put in motion. The yellow is next level, meaning we think it should happen sooner or later, depending on your budget process. That might take a little bit, but those will be the next in line. And then green are things we want you to be aware of. They're certainly coming up in the near future, but not quite so urgent that we want to be pushing it ahead, you know, immediately. So, so that's how the list is generated. We worked with Vogel on the list they generated for you. And then of course I was working with John and Steve on some of our communication to make sure that we were getting the information put together properly for you. And then, the other thing we took into account is just beyond the urgency is the lead time. And so there are items, for example, that we can get pretty quickly, smaller items. Even boilers aren't too bad right now. But as you've probably seen in other areas of facilities, lead times are pretty crazy right now. And so the chillers, for example, and actually that area, so all 3 red items are very long lead items, meaning 40-ish weeks. So we're really planning probably at this point for next summer for the work to be done. But that adds a little bit of urgency to it in terms of getting things moving forward, because the longer we wait, the longer that gets pushed out, obviously. And so that was part of what we kind of took into account as well in terms of that ranking. I don't know if have we looked at the Vogel list real closely. Don't mean to touch on that, Steve.
We'll just touch on it.
Yeah. So just if you look at the Vogel list, it won't match up identical. Vogel is taking a very big picture view at a lot of things for you folks. And a lot of that's based on lifespan. We and we worked with them on that, but then we took that list and said, hold on a second. We want to be very specific about what we're recommending, because we know it's not just unlimited budget. We also know that 15 years of this boiler isn't the time or anything else. And so we took that list and just refined it. They had items on there that certainly are worth noting, like an exhaust fan, for example. But an exhaust fan fails, it's not super catastrophic. It's relatively inexpensive and we can get it very quickly. And so it's not a huge urgency item to have on this list for you to budget for. So it won't match up exactly with the Vogel list if you're looking at actual items of equipment, pieces of equipment. But that was the purpose. This list was to kind of refine that and get it to the point where we know what we're talking about for what we're actually recommending today, or tomorrow or next year.
So when you look at this red, we should do it now, yellow a year from now, green 2 years from now. You know, what does that?
Yeah, I mean, that would be a reasonable way to do that. If you're trying to kind of schedule them now. I would say a lot of it depends on your budget. I know that there's some things moving around with, long list of items, and the dollar amount might waver a little bit based on lots of different factors for you guys. And so as that changes, you might start to creep down that list of yellows sooner or later, if it makes sense. I don't know enough about your roofing or lighting or everything else that, to know where that those budgets will fall. But yeah, that's probably a reasonable way to say is I would say red is something I would hope to get moving very quickly. Yellow, we can probably push out a little bit if budget says we need to, and then green a little bit further than that. And that now 1 year, 2 years is reasonable for sake of conversation at least.
If I can just jump in there for a minute. So one of the things that's going to be really important for us is to keep our eye on those heritage bids in June. Because as Randy and I have talked with the Vogel team, if we can, after June, our intent would be to pull contingency out of there to allow us to go deeper on the maintenance list. So what Pete is saying, like as an example, let's just say bids come in positive for heritage and we can pull $1 million out of that project. If we can pull $1 million out of that project, the 6.4 million for maintenance, district-wide maintenance could be, again, if the board decides, could go to 7.4 million. And then we could reevaluate and say, all right, let's do a couple of these items in yellow. But as Pete mentioned, it's also important, like John's going to talk next about roofing, which was one of the items underneath that list, that we continue to take a very close look at everything on that Vogel list and bring to you what we believe is the most critical right now, not necessarily what's the oldest. Because there's definitely a difference. And like when you look at the HVAC, you can see that. It's certainly important to know what's the oldest, right? Because it could fail. But it's more important, and I really appreciate our dialogue with North American Mechanical on this, to say, hey, if the Arboretum chiller goes out, there's not a second one there, right? There's no air conditioning, and you're talking, what, 10 months to get it in. So we didn't want to put you in a position where you felt like you needed to do something today. We wanted to give you the information today. We can bring this back because this committee will need to meet in May as an action item, so you can think about it, so we could get it going. But we wanted to get this in front of you as an example of kind of that deeper dive we're asking everyone to take, so that we can spend those dollars as best as we can. So if you have any questions for Pete, he's welcome to answer them. We'd also be happy to bring this back next month as well, if you'd like further discussion on it.
So you can't, this doesn't reconcile necessarily with that Vogel list, and that list that's another spreadsheet has a list of John's requests, a list of 2 different dollar amount things, I guess, depending on the amount spent on, and this list. Is there any way to reconcile any of these items and say, okay, that takes care of?
Sure, yeah, I see what you're saying, right? Try to match the
Yes.
2 up so that it's easier to see, like, as we go. And I think that's a great point, Ted. I want to make this easier for everyone to understand what we have accomplished and what we haven't, and how we've moved things around. So we can definitely do that. We can talk with Vogel about reorganizing that list and keeping it current with what we're recommending, so you can see it in one place instead of like, oh, here's this list, here's this list, here's this list. So we will do that for May. We'll get it more organized, because there's a few things that John was wanting to bring forward as well to do, that he was identifying as critical, that were also on the Vogel list. So we've been taking a deep dive in multiple ways, but I think that's a good point, Ted. Let's bring it together in one spot so you can track it all together.
Any other questions on this? Thank you, Pete, for your work. on that.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks, Jude.
Thanks, Steve.
And here's where we want to insert the middle school roof component.
Yes, so. Back to Jack. So I'm gonna have John talk about this, and if maybe he might need Scott's help too, potentially. If you want Scott, he can come up and join us.
Thanks to Scott for providing a lot of this information.
So just as background, this project was on the Vogel list underneath the $6 million. This has been an item that we've been tracking for quite some time. Is again, one of those more urgent items. We did bring this before the committee. Vogel identified this as something we should move forward as quickly as possible. This committee recommended to the board to approve a planning process, not the actual bids. And so I'll turn it over to John and Scott to talk through what they did and how they got to this point.
I think so. Like Steve said, the board approved the action for us to get bids for middle school fire alarm and middle school roofing. So we have the middle school roofing bids, and that's what I handed out today. In the original Vogel list that we've been working on, it has in here for the middle school $235,000, but that's just for the 1992 section. So the work that Scott and I have done to gather the bids with our contractors currently, they're recommending that we actually replace all three sections of the roof. The 1992 section is the oldest section. They think for cohesiveness of the roof itself and the viability of long-term, the life cycle of a new roof, it would be in our best interest to replace all three sections of the roof instead of merely the 1992 section. So that's, we approached it getting numbers that way. The oldest section, we have those numbers. And the entire roof as well, which that's what you have on your piece of paper. So the 1992 section ended up at 394,000 compared to the total list of 235. So again, with accessing materials and inflation, I'm sure there's a price discrepancy from when we'll pull this list together recently. So again, our recommendation would be to replace the entire roof, and the low bid is 631,000.
We still don't know, like when the building switches over, what that building's going to be modification wise and stuff like that. Or is it really, we're thinking it's gonna stay the same way, and we don't really know, I guess.
But I think when it comes to roofs, you know, you can change the interior, but if the roof is leaking and there's challenges there, you're gonna face bigger problems.
Yeah, it's really leaking. We have some issues there now. Scott's been great at working at getting those repaired, but it's in poor shape. To your point there, I think if we add on to, say, door one to reconfigure the middle school for a high school campus building, then I think it would simply add on to that section. We can modify the roof at that point. To Jack's point, the existing footprint of the roof would be intact and better off with the new system.
I think if you get black mold and things like that in there, you get major problems and, you know, bigger expenses.
Scott, can you talk to it all about the topic of like doing the oldest section only versus all of it and what you see?
I mean, we went into this getting all three sections, the southerly section, the main portion, which is the 92 section, and then the gym section. And to just do the 92 section, which was the older section were done in what,
2005.
So, I mean, you're losing almost 20 years already. So to not do them would be it like John said, cohesiveness of the entire, just do it and be done, and you'd be good for 25 years or whatever it will last. Right now, we are having a lot of issues with leaking. That I've had one company out here multiple times in the last month. And they came back yesterday to look at one on the middle school roof, and it's old. It's old. And then we actually looked at ballasted versus non-ballasted. Ballasted is rock. Rock is kind of old school. It's not the way to go anymore. I mean, like intermediate is all non-ballasted. It's all adhered. And it's a much easier way to find leaks. You put rock in the roof, you can't. You're up there searching for hours. The other thing that will come into play, this bid here is with leaving the insulation in place. However, we don't know how good the insulation is underneath that EPDM roof right now. And if some of it needs to be replaced, we have to go like $1 amount per square foot of which that is. So the number may change a little bit here and there, but does that answer your question at all?
Yeah, so I was gonna mention that the referendum in 2005 is the one that resulted in the additions to the middle school. So that roof is a little bit less than what you would like to see a roof last for, which is normally like at least 20 years. But it's close. I mean, to Scott's point, it's not that far away. That would be like 2025, it's 2023. So it might, that those portions on the edge of the school might be a couple of years before their useful life. But then the biggest part in the middle is the oldest part. And so the question really is for a more comprehensive, better roofing system. I think John and Scott, as they took a look at this whole project, thought that doing the entire thing now just made the most sense as opposed to doing the biggest part. And then maybe in 2 years, when the other parts hit 20 years, maybe just not the best approach to do it twice.
So are you looking at, right now, it's all rock on?
Only on the 92 section is all
So
rock.
that's the center,
That's the center portion.
and the other ones are rubber.
Yeah.
Rubberized roof.
Yep.
And would you pull that old rubber off?
Yep, you do. You pull the old rubber off. They actually put on like another little layer of insulation over the top of the insulation there, and then they put rubber back on.
I would think,
Do you have any roofing problems in that newer section? I'd say, like, it's probably all in that center part where you have.
To your question, Ted, as far as what's the impact for like planning moving forward. I agree with Jack, a lot of it is the interior. I think right now we're a concern and we've put off this roof project for quite a few years. To me, it makes sense to kind of do the whole thing at once and then have a reset the standard for what that roof is, given that they're almost 20 years old on the other side.
The other thing, I know this may not come into play, or it does come into play in my mind. Contractors are gonna be hard to get. This is gonna be a project that if it would get approved, completely approved, and I let the contractor know, he's gonna be scrambling to get this job done this summer. But the sooner the better in that case, because I've been told that what was it on that one? How many weeks out, you know? For a roofing project too. Yeah. Summer will be a scramble. Summer will be a scramble, but it might, you know.
so what happens if we wait 1 year? So we can't get it this summer, the building school next summer. Can that contractor come over and replace the roof? He's got his equipment here. Does that make sense?
I would have to talk to the contractor, whoever it is. I mean,
Well, what effect does that have on us?
well, the way the roof has been going over there, it's like every time it rains, there's leaks every time.
We'll be spending monthly for
Monthly.
be prepared.
But what you're saying, even when we go forward, it might not get done, because it's gonna be a challenge. Because of their resources.
Possible, possibly not. I don't know. It's only April right now. I mean, if they could get April, May, June, July, they might be able to get it done like in August.
But if they didn't, we're not impacted by the cost. It's like, this is what it is. You gotta finish it next year, we're finishing it.
Yeah, no, we shouldn't be impacted by the cost.
So they recalculate a bit for future materials pricing.
They would, or they,
It's unlikely they would lock us in with this material pricing. for a year now.
But we are, if we approve it today, we're locked in with this material.
We
price.
have the quote,
yeah,
correct.
Yes,
That's why it could be a piece that you prove it with the idea that it gets done this summer, if for any reason that they find that they don't have the lead time to do it this summer, it comes back.
Can it spill into fall? Is it something that if we start the school year and they're finishing, is that
I would say if they could get the majority done over the classrooms.
Yeah.
In the 92 section, if they could get that done, over the gym, you probably don't have as much disturbance.
I'd save that for last.
Yes,
Another thing that's on our side as far as the timing, Scott mentioned the insulation. We did calculations that the bids included a complete tear off for insulation. It was about $200,000 more expensive. Or if we discover a bad piece of insulation, do that ad hoc at a square footage price. So we calculated that having the lower price, and if they see bad insulation, we replace that per piece, right?
Yeah.
So this is the lower price. I think not doing the entire tear on insulation also helps us with the timing. So they should be able to do it over summer. Yeah.
do you have that square foot pricing on that? Or is that something that when they run into it, they're getting on the insulation and when it has to be?
yeah, it's like $350 or something. It's
$3.
$3.
And you can, I mean, you probably have a decent sense of where those areas probably are. So it's not-
Yes, yes and no. I mean,
Okay.
where our leagues have all pretty much been in the same areas.
but sometimes it comes in somewhere else and then
You are right. You are right.
follows that
It
path.
it will follow the pan to the lowest place.
Anyway, so I,
Make the motion to approve a little bit, with the understanding it's done this summer. If it falls to next summer, price is the same.
Second.
all in favor, say aye.
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 And just to quickly mention, obviously, we appreciated your approval recommendation to the full board about bringing an additional maintenance person on. That is allowing Scott to assist with project work like this. So we're very grateful that that was approved by the board, which is very helpful to the overall maintenance team to be able to have Scott work on these type of projects for us. And so you'll probably see more of Scott as he's working on various projects, and we're thankful that we were able to do that and be able to bring another person in. So
Thank you.
thanks for being here, Scott.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else under the district-wide maintenance plan? Okay, moving on to the capital maintenance projects.
So just to share a little background, I ran this topic by both the facility committee and the budget committee, and then at the regular board meeting. And the goal that the board came up with was to build a capital maintenance fund within Fund 10 to let that grow over time while we utilize the maintenance funds available in the referendum to do maintenance work. So it's a very good long-term strategy that'll put us in a strong position 5 years from now. With that being said, John then went to work with all of the building leadership to understand from them what some of the projects are that they have the most concern about in their building moving forward for next year. The total scope of what was shared with John was over $1 million. That's too high to approve at one time. Historically, we've been in the $525,000 range of projects. I'm gonna turn it over to John in just a minute, but just so you know, we've scaled the list back to projects that have quotes at 312,000. And then there's other projects in there that we're still working on obtaining quotes, and we want to bring that back to you. So we want to leave some room between what we've historically approved at 525 and what's on this list. Because some of those items are really important. Like John has on the list, safety glass, additional safety glass, which he can talk about. So we want to leave some room to be able to do some of this additional work. But I'm going to ask Rebecca to pull that up, and I'm going to have John just talk for a minute about your work with the building leadership and how you came up with the list, and then kind of how you pared it back and where we're sitting today.
Thanks, Steve. So this list is separated out by district, kind of overall district needs. So for example, emergency repairs for roofs, HVAC, plumbing and electrical, and the walking path in the south. North to south by Century Avenue is really bad, so we want to replace that. And then the safety film on all the doors, you don't have a quote on that yet. I'd like to go ahead and move forward on getting quotes on doing safety glass on all our school buildings currently. My predecessor put in safety film on the door ones in our buildings and 2 additional doors at the high school. So I'd like to expand that. And then,
So is that just on the doors? And what about the windows next to the doors?
at the door ones, if there was a side light that was 12 inches or more, that was also completed at the door ones.
And the door ones are the main entrance.
And is that, what would that prevent? A bullet?
So it's not bulletproof glass, however, it turns a glass into, makes it shatterproof basically.
Okay.
And it would take at least, it would take a minute or more for somebody to break through it. You can't kick through it, you can't shoot it and shatter and walk through it.
Okay,
It really creates a time barrier for somebody trying to come into the building.
okay.
And just so you guys know, we are implementing this technology on each of the doors at the new buildings that's already in place.
All right.
So what would you like us to do with this list here? See that you got it, it's 312,000 for 312,000.
So like Steve said, we compiled the list for items that are a safety concern or high impact or an emergency, if you will. That's how we broke the list out. We have multiple other items, but
John, can we go back to the top, Rebecca, on the district, replace the walking path near Century and Community Drive? Is that the one that goes up by the baseball field?
Sure.
Is that what you're talking about? Is that, would you replace that whole path where people have driven and we have the wheel marks alongside of it?
we would do that up to where the varsity and JV baseball fields, it splits.
So how do we prevent people from driving up there?
So I've worked on this issue as well. We have some bollards that can be breakaway bollards for first responders, like if an ambulance
Okay.
needs to come in, they can
Yeah.
simply smack it and run over it.
Yeah,
So bollards, rocks, signs. We don't want to prevent, again, first responders from getting up there or our
Correct.
maintenance vehicles from getting up there.
correct.
But the general public, the signage right now is pretty limited. It says authorized vehicles only, and that's.
And it, yeah,
Just drive.
I see cars up there all the time, so.
So the intent would be that once the repair is done, the general public is not allowed to drive.
And will it be a little bit wider? I mean. It seems like, I mean, is the asphalt broken or was it? You know,
I think multiple, with the dampness up there in the water and runoff and multiple vehicles. Our recommendation is to make it 10 feet. I think it's 8 feet.
I think it's 8 feet. John got a recommendation from the village to go 10.
Yeah, it seems like it should be a little wider.
I know what you're saying, if when the wheels are on the edge of the
Yeah.
pavement, you're gonna break them, an alligator and then break them off,
Right.
and that's where it all goes down.
So when you talk about the general public driving up there, is that including the coaches? You know, they can carry their bags up there and things like that.
Coaches and students drive there, yes.
You know, because, you know, even when you're riding bike, you know, and that's a bike path, they're parked right on the bike path.
Exactly. I've been there.
You
So
can
it's-
access it from both directions too. when you come
So
up.
there's 4 access points that I wanna secure, Ted, with bollards, signage.
Yeah. Okay, I just wanted to, you know, see the extent of that project. And that's all in that 20,000, the signage and trying to protect the,
This is just pavement.
yeah, well, we need to protect the use of it. At some point.
What are all the asterisks on these? I don't see anything. about it.
There, sorry, that's a leftover from
Okay.
signifying priority items.
Okay.
So you're welcome to ask any questions, of course, about anything on the list. The intent was to bring it down to a figure that we use. You can see as an example, safety film on glass. It says we're still working on getting the quote. We think that's more important than some of the other things that were on the list, so we removed them for now. And would like to come back to you in May with those remaining items, so you can see the total cost. The intent is to not to exceed the 525,000 that this committee has historically approved for these type of projects each year. So that was what we had brought forward for consideration, but you're welcome to ask any questions. Scott's here, John's here, or if you're comfortable with it, we would be seeking the approval of only the items with dollar amounts, and then we'll come back at the May meeting with the rest.
Can you talk about the expansion of the parking lot here at Bethel?
Sure, as you can see, no price there. We moved that into a second column that
Oh, okay.
may be up for future consideration with referendum dollars.
All right.
I guess depending on the quotes that come out, that might change a little bit, so there's no point in like approving. Unless there's a timing issue, that doesn't seem like it, so I'd wait to get other quotes.
Okay. So, you'd like approval of the things that you have quotes on today?
But that's what I'm saying, if we're, you're waiting to get other quotes, what if something might jump the price, oh, we should get this done and then bump this off the list, I guess that's what I was saying.
Yeah, I agree. If, you know, these are all priorities. You know, shouldn't we have the total picture to take a look at it? And then what we can do is come back and if it's over 500, if it's all under 550, which we normally approve, then, you know, we just go ahead for it. Is a month gonna hurt us?
I think for a couple of projects, my understanding is there's roof work at the TLC building that we are very concerned about getting lined up for this summer. So I think there's a few things on there. I can't comment to that as well as Scott or John could, but I do think there's a few things on there that do have timing issues.
I guess that was my point in saying that we're gonna approve 312 and then. Some of these quotes not yet given, if that might change some things, I would guess. It could.
Well, I would sort of submit that, go back to the roof on the TLC, if that's truly an issue and we want to get that
Then
done,
get it
let's
done.
get it done.
Right.
You know, what else is time sensitive on us?
Yes.
You guys know it better than we do.
Sure, I'm pretty confident. Because like Steve mentioned, we have typically 525 or so, and at 312, spending another 220,000, 210,000. We'll be able to fit in the items that don't have a quote yet, and we can prioritize those as well if they go over, but. I don't think, you know.
The only thing that I could see is issue with maybe like a lighting project. If there's a lot of fixtures. Getting into the fixtures might be an issue. I don't know. I mean, right now I have a small project over at middle school to replace a couple gym lights.
You're right, Scott. For example, the LED lights in the library, the middle school, no quote yet, but that's not an emergency project. So
It's not.
I think what
Easily
you're
take that off.
Ted say is that they're not comfortable approving the 312 until there's the other picture is drawn up. So they're asking kind of what are the 5 items that are needed to go right now because we have either lead time or other issues. So we had to identify those items that were of most critical, kind of being able to be completed on time. We could pull those and then approve those. I think that's what I hear you ask.
I think so. I mean, you're feeling confident that it will fall under that. I have no idea if that's true or not, you know, if that were true, then I don't have a problem, but.
I mean, when I looked at it, the TLC roof, getting it done in the summer before the students are back is probably the #1 thing on here.
I agree.
Just like the middle school, our goal would be to be done before school starts. Could we build the path in the fall? Of course. That's not a big deal. The path can be built whenever. That's not a problem.
You see any other items on it that we need to do right now? or
Yes.
back next month?
Okay, we got inlines, sidewalk. Lighting, obviously,
elevator security.
elevator security. That one's kind of, but I don't see that affecting students a lot. It's a security issue. It's just a security issue. Kids joyriding in the elevator.
So I would make the motion to approve the roof, elevator security, bring the rest back next month. When we got a full picture.
I second that.
Can I ask you, what's your opinion on pool lot? That lot that's a lot between the high school and middle school. That lot is probably the worst lot in the district as far as drainage, as far as asphalt busting up, as far as safety of.
How is that gonna line up with the work that has to be done on the track?
Yeah, we moved that over to the right column because John needs Roxanne to do engineering to make sure that we fix the water problems that are happening there. So that one's a little bit longer of lead time.
That's ready to be approved.
No,
So it's-
So that's a no quote item. And the other items, thank you guys for approving certain items, but the items with quotes are ready to go.
So the items that Jack just said, the TLC roof and the elevator, we approved those here today. And then bring the others back with the updated quotes next month.
that will work.
Yeah, let's do that.
I'm already in the process of getting a bunch of these quotes. So.
Okay. So we have a motion to that effect.
I second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We'll see the rest next month. Perfect. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you. Anything else? Any future meeting items that you want to talk about?
Just want to mention, I would request again that this committee schedule a meeting. In May, the week before the May board meeting, because I know we're going to want to bring back. Several of these items for your consideration, so.
Should we do that now?
Not sure what process you're gonna do with the board as far as committees, but there will be a few that we're gonna ask to meet before the May board meeting.
The committees won't change until after the May meeting, right? That's when the committees change is with the May meeting. Before the May meeting.
Yeah, because if anyone's term ends, it won't be on this committee, but
Yeah, but I don't think we change the committee membership until the May meeting is when we announce the new members. Oh, sure. Is when we have always done that in the past. So I think our May meeting will be the 3 of us.
okay.
So should we set that? Is that all right?
Yeah.
We
that's right.
set that
Yeah.
down. So you're looking at the week of May 1.
Yeah, and it could be, if you prefer mornings, any 7:30, we can make work.
Again, I would like to avoid Tuesday, but any other morning works for me.
We do on Monday
Monday, May 1st.
meeting.
I'm good. Monday, May 1st. 10.
Your central
Yep.
office. So around it,
What do you have?
we'll work around.
We'll work around it. It's fine.
7:30, May 1. Okay, motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Well, I need one. Yes,
Second.
all in favor, say aye. Aye. Thank you.
Thanks for your time today. Appreciate your support.
Thank you.